Good evening. Good evening. We are getting started here. As you can tell, I was a little bit distracted there. It's been a busy, busy day, but we have an exciting show for you this evening, as always. Welcome to Fresh Natural Live. I hope your Monday's been very eventful and very exciting. And of course, I hope you had a very productive weekend. I was pretty busy this weekend as well. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Frank Smith, whom I had the pleasure to meet. Actually, last week, it was introduced to me by a friend and colleague of mine. And the reason I like to consider him one of our heroes. He's a gentleman who had defeated liver cancer. And as our show dictates, it's liver cancer no more. And I like to refer to our patients, especially individuals like him. You remember Gigi, whom we had on a few weeks ago. I like to think of them as conquerors. And he's not a liver cancer survivor, but a liver cancer conqueror. And when you hear his story, you're going to understand why I say that. Today is part one of the story we're going to share with you. Mr. Smith is going to go through his story, and I want to hear from him, his process, his journey. Now, the journey, his life's journey starts long before the diagnosis of liver cancer. As we're not, we're human beings first and foremost. We're not diagnoses or whatever the case is, but our health conditions are part of our life's journey. So as with him, his health condition is part of his life journey. And so what I want to do is I want to share with you his story. And I think this is going to be really important and really exciting. So I want you to get your pens and pads out, get comfortable, get a nice cold press juice handy, your favorite raw, vegan, natural snacks, and all of these things, because I think you're really going to enjoy this show. You're going to learn a lot. And part one is going to be very thrilling, and part two is going to be thrilling. So hang on, get ready for another episode of Fresh Natural Live. Okay, welcome back. So I'm going to bring into the studio two of my esteemed colleagues who are here to join us today. Dr. Celeste Palmer is here. Hello. How are you doing today?
Good.
Saving lives in a pediatric world. And Dr. Pamela Atkins. Hello, Dr. Atkins.
Hi.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever part of the world you're on. You seem to be moving around the globe.
How's everyone?
So we're all doing great. Let me pull something off my printer. As y'all can tell, I'm being very last minute today, but we've got so much good stuff. It's worth being last minute. So I want to introduce to our audience Mr. Frank Smith. Mr. Frank Smith is 73 years old. He grew up by his description, and I'm going to have him tell his story in more detail, but his background health-wise, he was an alcoholic, a self-described alcoholic, a 20-year history of IV drug use that ended in 1985. He reports a 23-year history of cigarette smoking that ended in 7/1/86. He said both parents died of cancer. Dad had kidney with progressive bone cancer, and the mom had cancer at the age of 84. And so that's some relevant historical facts. And I give that to give you the background. I'm going to have him, tell his story because he can tell a story better than we can to give us a global picture. So, Mr. Smith, hello, welcome to Fresh Natural Live. How are you today?
Thank you for having me, Dr. Montgomery, Dr. Palmer, and Dr. Atkins. Good to be here.
Hello,
we had a conversation, and I'm going to mute. We probably have to go back and forth mute. I'm going to turn my speaker down. I think that's the culprit, and I think once we do that, we'll stop the background noise. So we had a nice conversation. I was introduced to you by Dr. Milton Mills, and he shared with me your fascinating story about how you had liver cancer and overcame that. But then when you and I talked and you shared your brief bio, and I looked at this long history of things, you've actually overcome a lot more than just liver cancer, and you've overcome quite a bit more. And I'm going to share my screen real quick of the brief, because I titled it "Liver Cancer No More," and I gave the subtitle "From Destruction to Healing." So I hope you didn't mind me taking the liberty of giving that description, but I gave that description from destruction to healing. And I think that could be applied to all of our lives, because we all have a historical background based on our lifestyle before we knew any better, that we were somewhat destructive to our bodies. And I think all of us who are on this health journey is in a journey of healing. And so I stated it that way to be broadly descriptive. And I don't know how do you take, what is your take on that?
Yeah, that's true. Life is a series of overcoming obstacles. And
Yeah.
I give God all the credit, because he's taken me through all of this so that I can tell other people about his ability to lead them through conquering their obstacles as well.
And Mr. Smith, if you can get closer to your microphone, because you have a fascinating story, I want to make sure everybody hears it clearly. So take us back to the beginning. So you grew up with an alcoholic and two smokers. So those are family members there.
Mm-hmm.
You say you have a 20-year history of IV drug use and a history of smoking. Just give us a description of your overall backgrounds, maybe your childhood. Start with some of the relevant things and give us some highlights of you growing up, the social atmosphere, et cetera, et cetera. What was it like being, Frank Smith back in the day?
Well, my father was an entrepreneur. My mom's was a government worker. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. And as with a lot of families during that time, it was about having fun. And fun was, a drink, a smoke. And at that time, smoking was advertised readily, and it was lauded by doctors.
There's some other things being advertised these days, lauded by doctors. We won't get into that, but go
ahead. And I can't blame them, because it's what we were taught. It's what they're taught, and in addition to getting paid by the companies that be. So I can't blame them, except I can blame them. And so it was about having fun. Substance abuse was a part of my upbringing, so I took it to a new level. As kids will do, they take things to a new level, and so I started experimenting from cigarettes and alcohol. I started experimenting with marijuana, and then on up the line of, amphetamines, pills, the works, hallucinogenics. And then, interesting enough, cocaine and heroin were flooded in our community. They just were poured in our community. And
where'd you grow up? What
I
part
grew
of
up in DC.
In DC? Okay.
Yeah. But a lot of other communities were the same way. It was cheap and readily available. And in the 60s, changing your mood was the thing to do. In addition to that, you did what you wanted to do as long as it didn't hurt anybody. So I got into that real hard and heavy, and ended up on intravenous drugs, and that lasted quite a while. And finally, I got a voice from the Lord. And it was more than a voice because I felt it with my whole body. He said, "If you keep doing this, you're going to be going to jail for the rest of your life, in prison for the rest of your life." And it dawned on me, this is abnormal. I don't feel these voices with my entire body, you know.
Yep, yep, yep.
So I better go ahead and straighten up now because I'm definitely don't. I don't know about this voice, but I definitely don't want to be going back and forth to jail. So I went. Interesting enough, a drug program opened up that day, and I told them to give me 3 or 4 days so I could withdraw from this methadone that I was taking now. That was supposed to be the solution to drug abuse. And I got in, and that was, after some struggles, I had to learn because I'm the type of person you got to sit down and um, teach and show me how to do this thing because I was trapped by then.
Now, what age was this when you went to rehab and got on the
This
methadone
was
program?
age 37.
37.
Yeah.
Was that successful right away? How long did it take you to get off the those drugs?
Yeah. So that was successful, but I tried by myself a number of other times.
Mm.
Um, a number of other times, and I didn't have God, and I didn't have the program. So that was successful for me. But at the same time, well, 11 months later, I quit smoking cigarettes too.
Oh,
Um,
wow. How'd you do that?
yeah, same thing. I was feeling bad, and I said, "This is crazy to be in a drug program and still using a drug." Right? That was
Well,
making me feel bad.
it was good that you recognized cigarettes as a drug, because a lot of people don't think of it that way. So
Yeah.
I think you had a mindset. So I'm going to welcome a few other people. Catherine Welch, hello. Nicole Caldwell, hello. Beth Kelly, Lady J from England, hello. Barbara Pillis, Barry McCoy, how are you doing? Good to see you. Zorro has a question. I'll answer it quick. Zorro wants to know if all drugs are liver toxic. Many drugs are, but other drugs may be cleared by the kidneys, etc. And so they're prescription drugs. So many drugs that go through what we call first pass, you take it in, it's digested in the liver, it's broken down by the liver. They are liver toxic, but there are other drugs that are primarily cleared by the kidney that are more nephrotoxic. Some are broken down in other ways. So I don't like to say all, but a lot of drugs are. And much of the time, if people are on multiple drugs, there's a good chance that one or more of them are cleared by the liver and hepatotoxic, or as we say. Beth Kelly, hello, Rose Fiddler. So,
Dr. Montgomery, will you specify like that even includes like acetaminophen and ibuprofen?
Yes.
Yeah, so great point. So drugs that we consider harmless, because when people say drugs, they think about the heavy stuff, but these, so-called, just take a Tylenol, acetaminophen, or whatever, or an Advil. These things can have adverse effects on the liver that affects us at the cellular level. So the mitochondria is adversely affected. Some drugs, NSAIDs, could affect the kidney, the GI tract. So all of these drugs, when we think of these, heroin and all of this stuff, but there are many other drugs that can be very, very harmful, and maybe as harmful as these other types of drugs that we say frown upon, but yet they are very problematic. So those are great points.
And sold in the pharmacy.
And sold in the pharmacy. That's exactly right. That's so anyway. So that's a good one. And did you ever do cannabis?
I'm sorry.
Did you ever smoke marijuana?
Oh yeah, that was the first illegal drug that I smoked. That I did, and I quote loved it so much, that hey, that opened the way for me to experiment with other things.
Interesting. So basically, you got off cigarettes, the illicit drugs, around the age of 37. And then, and you said 1982, you're diagnosed with hypertension. So you had hospital admissions with severe arrhythmias due to potassium depletion because you're on a diuretic for hypertension. So you treated with one medication for one condition, created another issue. I see you report a heart attack, 3 sinus surgeries over an 18-year period of acute sinusitis. You're on antibiotics, several visits to the doctor's lab. Let me ask you, as we comb through these diagnoses, what kind of dietary habits did you have? And did you exercise regularly, et cetera? So we kind of hit on the drugs and alcohol and cigarettes. But what were the foods that you ate?
Well, the foods, I ate the standard American diet, the SAD diet, including, if you want to put it that way, I ate the black standard American diet. Right? Barbecue, you know, lots of fried things and processed meats and eggs and dairy. Yep. Very little vegetables, and the vegetables that I ate were overcooked. And very little fruit, some canned fruit, but very little fruit. I ate what my parents ate. And I ate what my friends.
And this was up to what age, roughly?
This was from birth.
From birth. Okay.
Yeah, this was from birth.
And so back in 82 and all this time, the sinus surgeries, you eat that standard American diet. So was that after you had kicked the habit on some of these other illicit drugs?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you'd gotten off of those things and you were doing fine there. But then you were on the standard American diet, the soul food version, if you will. And so you continue to have health problems. Were you taking any prescription medications? You mentioned one, a diuretic. Were you taking any other prescription medications?
Not that I remember. Well, let me take that back. Every time I went to the doctor, I would end up with a prescription. So in the end, I had a whole closet full of medicines, right? And I noticed that each one had an adverse effect. So
Gotcha. Gotcha. So I'm going to pause right there. Dr. Atkins, I just want to get your take on it. So, I mean, your assessment, Mr. Smith, at this point, he's has a history of illicit drug use, and he's on the soul food diet. He's on a lot of medications. Give us your take on what's going on in his body and what's happening to him. What are the issues? I might even ask you what's been more detrimental to him, the standard American diet, soul food, or the illicit drugs. We can kind of throw that up for debate, but give me your take on that.
Well, I just thank you, Mr. Smith, for sharing your story. I think it's very powerful, and I think it's a story of a lot of people. But with not just the diet, with the processed food and the fatty meats and the smoked meats and the barbecue and the fried foods, etc. But also we have to think of alcohol. Alcohol is liver toxic, so the liver has to work harder. And so you put with that, prescription medications that need to be metabolized by the liver and illicit drugs at some point, so it's like double, triple whammy. Then if we drink sodas, high fructose corn syrup, is very, can be detrimental to the liver and lead to fatty liver, which a lot of Americans have, or non-alcoholic type of hepatitis that can lead to cirrhosis or liver failure, just purely a diet with processed food and a lot of high fructose corn syrup. So he had kind of triple, quadruple whammy here, things going on.
Yeah. So Dr. Palmer, you see a lot of kids, on the standard American diet, but also teenagers are drinking and smoking. College kids are doing these illicit drugs. And so, this, starts at a very young age, as Mr. Smith shared with us. this was something that, he had a family and of course it was the time as well. I mean, cigarettes were promoted and that type of thing. And so it was really the social environment with him as well as, the family environment. So it's kind of a, global environment. What are you seeing with kids nowadays? I mean, that was then. What are we seeing now? And is this same issue being replicated with that same fast living and the food?
I'm going to piggyback off of what Dr. Atkins just said. And I don't think that we can project, again, what the future is going to hold, because the children now are getting processed sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and processed foods much earlier in life than we did 20 years ago. And this is a mainstay in their life. So what happens to a child who's been exposed to processed food, processed sugar for 30 years? When is a disease going to manifest, and how is it going to manifest? I don't know the answer to that, but there is definitely, I feel like, going to be an escalation in diagnosis of something, because we know that sugar itself is harsh on the liver, and we are seeing children. I check liver enzymes in children. It's kind of a standard check between the ages of 9 and 11 to get a baseline, and some children do have elevation of their liver enzymes when I check this, and it comes from, it's from fatty liver, from eating too many fats. And so, we talk to the parents, and sometimes that will help them to kind of see that the processed food and the fast food is not such a good idea, and they'll take it more seriously once we see labs. But, this is happening. And we are trying to show the parents the fault and the problem with taking in a lot of fast food. Even the food from the grocery store is technically fast food now. I mean, I think that's a topic for another discussion for another day. But, helping parents and children to recognize what real food is versus what this food products are, and trying to convince them to be interested again in eating real food for nutrition and not just eating for entertainment purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that last comment, eating for nutrition, eating for intentionally, not for entertaining purposes, because that's a big problem. What is your take on that, Mr. Smith, eating for entertainment? Would you characterize your previous approach as eating for entertainment, or how would you characterize that?
Everything was for entertainment. everything, everything that I did. So naturally, eating is a big part of our lives. So naturally, it had to taste good, and I got whatever was out there, fast foods, cooked foods, whatever was out there.
Tell us about the heart attack. Was it a major heart attack? Did you get a stent? Was it a mild heart attack?
No, it was a mild heart attack. I was in the airport in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and I just dried up and started seeing black, and went out for a bit, and came around. I came around with myself. I didn't go to the doctor or anything. I didn't know it was a heart attack until later. When I went back to the hospital, and they said those what the troponin was up.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Troponin was up, and the doctor told me the cardiologist told me I had a heart attack. So that was weeks later. So it was fairly mild.
And how old were you at this time?
I would say 40, 42, 43, something like that.
42, okay, 40. Now, another part of your history I think is quite interesting is that you had 3 sinus surgeries over an 18-year period for acute sinusitis. You're on antibiotics up to 6 times a year. Is that 6 times a year over 18 years?
Yes. It built up to that.
Okay. Some years more or less, but you're on a lot of antibiotics for a long period of time.
Yes.
And and that's interesting that you mentioned that. And one thing I want to highlight for our audience, and we're talking about adverse effects of drugs, quote unquote, whether we call them illicit drugs or prescription drugs or whatever. But I do want to highlight this because when I looked at this history, it's something that jumped out at me because, being on antibiotics, and I mean, one course of antibiotics can throw your microbiome off quite a bit, but you're on up to 6 times a year. So maybe sometimes twice or 3 or 6 or whatever over 18 years. And I can only imagine, I'm not sure if I can imagine, but I can maybe guess at what's happening with your microbiome. But I want to really I want our audience to put a pin in that because, antibiotic use is something that we do very commonly. And doctors may prescribe it at the bat of an eye. But antibiotics can have a significant adverse effect on your microbiome, and the especially the gut microbiome. And your microbiome has a big impact on your immune system. So when you talk about immunity, then you want to say, well, okay, what is your immune system important for? Well, fighting infections, but also protecting you from cancer. The body's constantly fighting against cancer. So if you're taking a big hit on the immune system, that's it. Yeah, doctor.
So I just wanted to add, you can, of course, continue, but we do unfortunately use a lot of antibiotics in pediatrics.
Yep. Yeah. And, that's an important point, too, because, the microbiome is it's a collection of organisms. I think I've heard and read experts say that we have 10 times the amount of microbial cells than we have innate cells. And then it's estimated that we have probably 100 times more microbial genetic material than we have innate genetic material. So we are more of our microbiome than we are of our cells. And a microbiome has a very important symbiotic relationship with our innate self, if you will. And so it's really important if we throw that microbiome off, we are in essence, I don't want to say destroying, but certainly effectively harming our ecosystem. And we are an ecosystem where we have this huge microbiome living symbiotically with our innate cells. So I just want to highlight the concept of these antibiotics. That doesn't mean that the other medications you were on was not harming the microbiome, because I'm sure they were. But antibiotics is something that we can easily point the finger at. And so, I'm just pointing a finger there. But I thought it was important that you mentioned that in your bio. So fast forward to what I want to do is, before we take a station break, I want to walk right up until the time you had the diagnosis, and then I'll take us to station break, and then we'll come back and get into the nuts and bolts of that diagnosis. But so you had the heart attack, had the sinus surgery. How old were you when you were diagnosed with liver cancer and cirrhosis?
Let's see. I was in 2013. I was 8 years ago. So
okay.
65.
65. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So from the time you had all these illnesses, let me just get a good characterization. You're in your 40s when you had the heart attack. Were you in and out of the doctor's office a lot, or in and out of hospitals a lot? I know you had the sinus surgeries and all that. Would you call yourself a sickly person?
A very sickly person. And I was overweight. In 2011, I was 211, right? So at that time, I'm suffering from a lot of things, and I don't know why. Of course, the cancer had already started. Part of the intravenous use gave me hepatitis C. Hepatitis C is another killer of the liver. So I'm starting to feel bad, and then there became a period of high stress. I've got a business, and I was working a job, the high stress job. I'm in IT, and so I was doing both at the same time, and I'm sick at the same time. So it I got sicker.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's a good. I think that's a nice little segue. So you bring us up to this point. You were very sickly. You had bad food. You had survived the illicit drugs. A lot of people would have just given you a blue ribbon and walked off. But then you were on the standard American diet, the black standard American diet, as you described it, the soul food version, and you're on a lot of prescription medications. You were working hard, had a stressful job. One could argue that you were leading a productive, successful life, but there was some destructive aspects of that, and I can identify with some of those, having a busy, stressful life, and getting sicker all the time. And so I want to put a pin in that, and want us to take a break. And when we come back on the other side of break, what I'd like for us to do is I'd like for us to look at the setup for this diagnosis of liver cancer, because we talk about a diagnosis of liver cancer, but our previous discussion is really the buildup to that whole process. And so let's go to break, and we'll come back and finish up with continue from that point. Greetings, I'm Dr. Montgomery. Thanks for joining us this evening. I want to share information about our FoodRx Healthy Lifestyle Series. The FoodRx Healthy Lifestyle Series is a comprehensive health and wellness coaching program designed to help you navigate your lifestyle towards optimal health. Do you want to reverse or control a chronic illness, or reduce or eliminate medications? You may want to avoid potential surgeries or medical procedures, or perhaps boost your immune system or improve your fitness level, or much more. The program starts with an intense 5-session, 4-week virtual coaching jumpstart phase, where you'll join a group of like-minded individuals dedicated to improving their health. You'll be provided a lot of support materials, including nutrition plans, recipes, supplement plans as needed, or fitness plans, or much more. You have full-year access to the support materials as well as our health and wellness team during and at the completion of the 4-week jumpstart period. To learn more about this program, connect on one of our links below, or schedule a call with our team members. Let them know if you wish to speak to me directly, and they'll arrange a time for you. Optimal health is a lifelong journey. Let us help you navigate it to your most desired destination. Okay, we're back here. I'm bringing our guests back. So again, as I was saying, we had just gotten up to that part where, and thanks for giving us detailed history. We walked through this whole process of your lifestyle from a youth, through young adulthood, all the chronic illnesses. You had really conquered some major addictions. I mean, God led you to give up the smoking and illicit drugs and all of those things, which were major accomplishments in themselves. But then, here you are on standard American diet, stressful work, and that whole concept of total healthy living really had not seeped through. And I guess, as they say, God was not done with you yet, as the saying goes. And so, bigger battle. So you, real quick, were you diagnosed with cirrhosis? Did you know about the liver cirrhosis, or the Hep C, before you knew about the liver cancer?
No, all those times I was going to the doctors, getting blood tests and whatnot. The indicators were there when I had to find out for myself. The indicators were there: high testosterone off the charts. Other issues. My liver enzymes, they weren't particularly elevated, but slightly, slightly. And then, I was going to a lot of different doctors to find out about this testosterone, and that's a big indicator. And it turns out this gastroenterologist said, he told me later, he said, man, everybody that was raised in the 60s needs to be tested for hepatitis C. In fact, he told my doctor that,
Oh, wow.
just because the sexual experiences and the illicit drug use.
Wow.
Yeah, everybody.
I'm glad you mentioned the liver enzymes being only slightly elevated because, many doctors, when they check for liver function tests, they'll check the LFTs. And if the LFTs look okay, then they say, well, the liver's okay. And that can be very misleading. My mother died from liver failure. And
Really?
it was her situation was that she had a meningioma, which was very easily surgically resected. She had chronic illness, diabetes, and all that, standard American diet, and so on. And of course, I ended up caring for her. This is before I knew what I knew. In fact, on her deathbed, I started learning this stuff.
Wow.
But to make a long story short, is that her LFTs were always normal or very close to normal. And there was never a question about liver. Now, she was on maybe 10 drugs that were cleared by the liver. The standard American diet with substances and preservatives cleared by the liver. So she had end-stage liver cirrhosis near the time of her death. And what brought it out was that, after the surgery, they put her on anticonvulsive medications prophylactically. And those things would wipe her out. She couldn't metabolize it.
Yeah.
And they continue to try different things with antibiotics and different things, infections and all. And it essentially sort of killed her liver. And that's what led to her demise. And so it was an eye opener for me. And now, even my practice now, to look at liver function, I don't just look at liver enzymes. I look at the PTNI-NR, I look at albumin level, and I look at ammonia level. And if 2 or 3 of those are slightly off, that tells me that the hepatocellular function is off. Now, it's not 100% perfect. It's not, going to diagnose everything, but it gives you a decent look at function. Of course, I do imaging studies as well. Now, I always have a high suspicion if somebody's been on a lot of medications and a lot of, substances that would harm the liver. I treat it with a high degree of suspicion. And anything that's a little off related to the liver, we're going to be very cautious to try to address that. And so it's interesting that you have a similar story because, the liver enzymes were almost normal. And I noticed that on your records. I noticed that you had alpha fetoprotein levels through the roof and the liver enzymes were just almost normal. And the doctors will look at that and say, okay, liver's fine. And it couldn't be anything further from the truth. So I thought that was...
Back then, they weren't even testing for the alpha fetoprotein because the LFTs were normal. So it wasn't until I learned that I had the cancer that they started testing for AFP.
Yeah, and that's really appropriate. It's typically used as a marker to follow, not necessarily diagnostic. There are other things that can cause an elevated alpha fetoprotein. Dr. Palmer, I think you see alpha fetoproteins in some of your normal patients, right?
Yeah, we don't really test a whole lot.
Yeah. But it could be elevated in babies up until they're 1 year old. So we can, but yeah, we don't, it's something I don't, of course, cardiologists don't test a lot, but anyway, so take us to your diagnosis. So this had been overlooked for some time. Take us to that moment. Honestly, here you had some abdominal pain or something. You were diagnosed, you went to the hospital at night enduring severe abdominal pain. Take us to that time and what happened, what led to you going to the hospital and what happened with the diagnosis?
This was the second time I'd had abdominal pain, but this one was more severe. It was in August of 2013. And I crawled around on the floor all night praying because this pain was so severe. I had some pain medicine and generally I would because I'd had severe arthritis too, in hips and back. And so I had to use some of that pain medicine, and I had to take 5 times as much as I would normally take, and just to assuage the pain, just a little bit. So it kind of cleared up the next day, and I reluctantly told my wife what I'd been doing all night. And she said, "Hey, you're going to the hospital right now."
You said reluctantly. I like that. Oh, by the way, Nicole Caldwell says she can't believe you're 71. I think it's 73. Is that right?
73, yes.
73. So you're right. It's not 71. It's 73. But say you look and sound much younger. So there you go.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So you told your wife, and what happened after that?
So we went to Sibley Hospital here in Washington, D.C., which is one of the better hospitals, and they ran me through all kinds of tests, ultrasound, MRI, CAT scan, and they diagnosed me with liver cancer, hepatocellular liver cancer, and cirrhosis as well. And so, man, I'm okay. It's my time. My dad died at 66 from a cancer. My mom died at 84 from a cancer. She died in my arms, by the way. I took care of her as well. And the cancer, I said, well, it's my time. So I went home and started making end of life plans. Then I prayed. And I said, God, I'm not ready to go now. Extend my life. And I'll run for you again. And I started researching, because I'm an IT guy, and I started researching whether, because I went to 3 sets of doctors, by the way, at the same time. One out of Sibley, which is ruled by the John Hopkins system. So they had a doctor, a surgeon in Baltimore at John Hopkins University. He wanted to cut half my liver out.
Wow.
And let it regrow, the cancerous part. So put him on hold, went to the Georgetown doctors, Lombardi Cancer Center. They wanted to put me on a chemotherapy right away. Put them on hold, went to another set of doctors at the urging of a nurse friend of mine who's, by the way, had colon cancer. And they wanted to do radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery. So I said, hey, wait a minute. Something's wrong here. The doctors couldn't concur, and these are all renowned doctors. So I'm researching myself. So I'm finding.
Well, I'm sorry. What odds did they give you?
What?
What odds did they give you? Let me turn my.
6 months to live.
Even with the surgery or radiation or chemo.
6% chance to live 6 months.
That's with the treatment.
Well, yeah, that's if I didn't do anything.
Gotcha. Okay. What odds did they give you for the surgery? Did the surgeon say you can cure it?
They didn't. They didn't give me any odds. Nobody gave me any odds except the last doctor, who said, we're just trying to get you 5 years. We're just trying to get you 5 years, which is standard for cancer. They can get you 5 years. They can mark you down as a success.
That's right. That's for their data.
Right.
They keep you along for 5 years. Once they get you there, then it's like, okay, we're good.
So he gave me, he had a patient in the waiting room at the same time he was talking to me, and he pointed to her, and she looked sick as a dog. Wait a minute, I can't, if that's a success, I don't want to be that kind of success. I was already sick. I was very sick. And so I kept researching, and I kept running across these hits about natural treatment, the Gerson therapy, other places that did it. And naturally, I ran across Chris Beat Cancer, and Chris Beat Cancer has got a great site like you do. He's got a YouTube channel, and what he does is give testimonies. You know, the people are there giving their testimonies. So there was a lot of them. So this stuff is starting to sink in, but I'm still moving slow. And then I got sick again, you know, very sick, and I had to go into the hospital. They kept me, I think it was 16 days at Georgetown. And meanwhile, I know some stuff by then. So I'm not eating the food. You know, I knew that was the epitome of the standard American diet. And I'm not drinking what they're saying. I'm on IV antibiotics then because it's a bile duct issue. And so I'm getting sicker, but I'm not eating that. My wife is bringing me in things and bringing me in juice here and there. All right.
So you started.
Get out of there.
Now you took from the Gerson, so you saw the Gerson program online and you started following their recommendations, correct?
Slowly. That hospital visit got me to do it in earnest. Right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, that hospital visit got me serious. So,
Wow.
and I'm sick. Then, you know, I had to go to the grocery store, come home and rest. Unpack the groceries, go and rest. You know, prepare the materials for the juices because my wife is working. Prepare the materials, the prep, and go rest. And then juice and drink some and go rest. But I started feeling better almost immediately.
Mr.
Almost immediately.
Were you doing 100% juice?
100% juice. What I could eat, what I could eat, I was eating according to the Gerson recommendations. So raw food, some cooked food, you know, cooked carrots, potatoes, some other things, and oil-free, completely oil-free. And then I found out that salads would make me feel good. Leading up to this, I learned that certain foods would make me sicker. This was before I had to go in the hospital, and before I started even doing the research. Fish, you know, I eat cod would make me sick. Eggs would make me sick, and after 2 or 3 times, I had to cut it out. You know, I have to cut it out, and some other things because I'd stop red meat and chicken would make me sick, you know, these kind of things. So I would cut them out. And so I was weaning myself into a plant-based diet just because my body said, hey, this stuff hurts. You know, my liver didn't like it. My body didn't like it. Right.
And just as a commentary, because I want to give in part 2 next week we're going to get into this in more detail. But just a little bit of a bit of science behind this. You know, animal proteins that we consume, and even if we just leave out the chemicals and all the processed things that are in them, you know, it has to be processed by the liver. And the nitrous compounds on the animal protein has to be, you know, neutralized. So it's converted initially to ammonia, and that ammonia has to be converted to urea, which then passes through the bloodstream. And so the liver has to work to do that. And so there's a process that the liver has to go through. So the cold pressed juices, I can imagine, are nourishing and hydrating you. And it's not causing the pain and work of digestion. And so I suspect that's, you know, what sort of help you recover. It's interesting you said you would juice and then would rest. And rest, of course, is important. The body rebuilds. And so there's juicing, and then when you're not juicing, you're sleeping and resting and fasting, and you're letting the body heal itself.
Yes.
And so it's kind of a nice process that you described there that shows us, what was going on. And so what happened with the doctors? Now, you went to 3, they recommended different things. You turned them down. You had gotten sick. You had to go to Georgetown and get some IV antibiotics. At what point did you get to where you were completely away from the doctors? Did they call you? Did they follow up? What was going on in that regard in terms of your allopathic caregivers?
Well, the last one, the one that wanted to cut, burn, and shoot me up with chemo, he said, well, no, he actually scheduled me for an biopsy against my will. Right?
Okay.
And they called me and said, hey, when would you like to come in? I said, wait a minute, wait. I didn't make this appointment. And he said, no, your doctor did. But I didn't request it. I didn't agree to that. And I learned by then to stay away from those doctors because they would pressure you. Every time I went to go back and visit them, they'll say, it's very important that you start this today or tomorrow. They were really high pressure. And you look at the white coat and you look at the staff and you look at the offices and the equipment. And he said, there's something in you that says, these people know what they're talking about. But by then I've researched, I researched and I got this nagging feeling that, hey, no, you don't. And then my dad had a surgery. My mom's had radiation. My cousin, 82-year-old cousin, by that time had chemotherapy, and all of them died.
Wow. So yeah. So all of that was going to get, but it's interesting that you said that you look at the white coat, you look at the environment, and something inside of you tells you that they know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. So even all the research that you had done, there was a force. So you had to stay away from them. I mean, am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, you are. And in addition to that, we're trained to rely on the doctors from birth. We're trained to do that. That's what everybody did, and that's what we did. And there's some very good things about the medical practice, medical science. Very good things. But in this case of healing diseases,
Yep. So that's fascinating. What Zora wants to know if you did the coffee enemas. Did you follow all aspects of Gerson?
I did, and I still do from time to time. When I need that cleanse, I do. But it turns out to be a lot of caffeine. It's a lot of caffeine.
So basically, you get the bag, and then they have a detailed protocol. There are different coffee enema protocols. Mm-hmm. Did you think that was helpful? Did you sense that was helpful to you? I mean, obviously, you got.
I did. And the science behind it is that you have to eliminate these tumors while they're dying off. Your body's killing them off, but they will become toxic if you don't eliminate them. So you take these enemas every day. Now, I couldn't do the coffee as often. I just found it difficult to hold. But lemon and water, distilled water, of course. I'd do that, and I would eliminate chunks of stuff. And I got better within weeks. And
wow, that's amazing. Better within weeks. Now that's quite amazing. So the other thing is that, and I'm going to show some images pretty soon of the tumor and then what happened after. So you started noticing very quickly, just on eating the food, the juices, that you started feeling better.
Yes.
And it's not like, I mean, it was like days to weeks. I'm adding days. You said weeks, but
The days, I started feeling better in days, really.
gotcha.
And I noticed that because the time that I had to rest in between tasks was less. And I would eliminate some of those rest periods, you know, and I was able to function. And then I think it was, and that was in October and February. I was really feeling good. In April of 2014, I was able to take some room air conditioners out of my shed and
Oh, wow.
install them on the second floor in the bedrooms by myself.
Wow.
Right.
That's amazing. What I want to do before we get to the image, I want to pause because you say some things that I think are very, very important because, and not to be too critical of the standard allopathic treatments, but, when you go through chemo and surgery and all of these things, you're hurting. I mean, let's say hypothetically, because your natural approach, you got better, and let's say hypothetically the chemo and surgery and all that stuff could have gotten you better. But still, the downside on those issues in that therapeutic arena is that you're not feeling good. I mean, you got chemo, you're sick, you're vomiting, you're in the hospital a lot. That maybe fever and whatnot. But here you're saying once you started doing these things, you started feeling better. And I don't think we should gloss over that because this natural healing process is one where not only you're healing, but you're feeling better in the process. I mean, the process is less painful. And you're not the only one that I've heard say that recovery. And so that's quite amazing. Let me do any other comments, Dr. Atkins, Dr. Palmer. I mean, this is an amazing story.
Sorry, I bounced in and out. It's thunder and lightning over here, so my internet went out. But
yeah, I know. I'm hoping I'm not too far from you. See, I hear the same thunder and lightning.
I see that Zero asked about black coffee, and there's a whole lot of controversial information out there about enemas and coffee enemas and things like that. But Dr. Gerson has her own own coffee that you can purchase online that is their coffee specifically for enemas that you don't take orally. You only use it for the enema. So just FYI.
Yeah, and that's a good point you raised because all coffees aren't created equal, and they probably source their coffee. If they don't grow it themselves, I don't know, but they probably carefully source it. And I'm not sure if you want to just get coffee off the shelf. Not criticizing Folgers or anybody, but I think, but yeah, I think. So Nicole Caldwell, curious to hear, Dr. Montgomery, do you think that most oncologists have their hearts in the right place? They just don't know or believe in the power of nutrition. I think that's an interesting question. It's a complex one, and my answer to that evolves or has evolved. And it's one thing to say we're all a bunch of evil bastards, and maybe that's some element of that. And I think this it's probably more complex than we know because there are a lot of factors involved. First and foremost, we're entrenched in a process and indoctrinated in a process, and so I suspect there's a level of brainwashing that is in part and parcel to that. And so, I mean, I think that's a big element, but I think it's reasonable to ask that question. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Dr. Atkins? Are we just a bunch of evil bastards and just, don't care about patients? Or what say you regarding it? I'm going to put Nicole's question back up there so everybody knows what we're responding to. But I think it's a great question. I mean, where are the hearts of our doctors, oncologists in particular, but doctors in general?
Yes, I think our doctors, medical doctors, are trained in the system, and so very with a strong emphasis on pharmaceuticals and traditional training and surgery and chemo. So they're not enlightened to or spend time in holistic type of approach or nutritional type approach unless they take a detour. And so this is what they're taught. And so they're not exposed to it. And many times oncologists will say, eat whatever you want, it's no big deal, just take the chemo and and really putting your system at rest, your liver at rest with the juices, and not doing the cooked foods, as many cooked, especially meats and animal products, and more live enzymes can be very healing, as we found out. And so, but I just think doctors are not exposed to it. So you believe what you're trained in, and invested your money and your time in. And so, I don't think it's evil, but that's what they believe. As far as the coffee enemas, coffee enemas are detoxifying of the liver, and so it's what's supposed to draw out the toxins. And basically, I don't think you always have to buy the Gerson's coffee, but you want a non-chemicalized coffee, more organic, etc. To do that. But there are a lot of information online about coffee enemas. I think the caution is some people get kind of addicted to it because they feel so good and overdo it. I'm not sure how many times you were doing, but some people will do it on the Gerson program multiple times a day. But you can flush out a lot of minerals and cause a mineral imbalance, if you're not hydrating with good minerals and juices. So I just want to caution the public not to overdo it, If
Great,
Can I
great,
add,
great point.
can I add to Dr. Atkins? And so, I mean, to Nicole's question, I think also, being on the doctor side, we get to see a little bit closer. So my take on that is I look at my colleagues and I see that my colleagues are also sick. So doctors are sick also, and they're taking all of these medicines and they're doing these things to themselves. So I feel like they really believe in the system, and that the system is going to work for you because they believe it's going to work for them. And that's a little bit of the sad part, because there have been times when I've gone to a conference, which is a plant-based conference, and come back and kind of gotten some snide remarks about nutrition being quack medicine. So from a colleague, and that was kind of a running joke. But knowing that colleague also has some medical issues, and is taking a lot of medicines. So, our colleagues are also suffering and doing the same thing to their own selves, to their own bodies.
That's a good point. One of the things I was doing at the same time that I was juicing and whatnot, I would have to relearn. I had to relearn everything about nutrition. And one of the things that I learned was how Rockefeller and other people started this delve into medicines and petroleum-based medicines and whatnot, and how they got away from things like chiropractors and natural doctors and homeopathic doctors, and how they basically made them bastards, made them quacks, just by the propaganda that they would promote in medical schools and in the public, period. But I researched other things. I researched what cancer was and the basis of all these other diseases. And so I had to simultaneously unlearn and relearn what the correct way of doing things was. And somebody liberated me. They said, don't scrimp on your health. Scrimp on everything else, but don't scrimp on your health. So I started spending money like crazy: juicers, Vitamixes, books, videos. I got a library. Video. YouTube is my friend. And I got even better with my research. Learned what doctors I could rely on, and what ones I couldn't, just by what they were saying. And so I got into it.
Yeah, I like that comment. Don't scrimp on your health. Anything else? Patients often will tell me, oh, the healthy food too expensive. I said, well, wear cheaper shoes.
Don't go out to these restaurants.
That's right. So one last question. I'm going to show some of these images. What kind of water do you drink? Do you drink distilled water?
Distilled water. Yeah, I put lemon or lime or both in.
And then tell us why you drink distilled water. That came up in an issue in another program I was in earlier today. But why do you drink distilled water?
Because I don't want any fluoride in it. I don't want any other chemicals in it. Spring water, it's part of the water table. And our water table has been severely polluted, along with our ocean water and river waters. It's just severely polluted. So I already had liver cancer. I had liver issues and, kidney issues and whatnot. And so I didn't want to put any of that stuff in there. If I want it in my body, I'm going to put it in there.
Gotcha.
On purpose. So,
gotcha. That's a great point. And I think that was the argument raised by another person I heard speaking, what have you. Let's see. Emily, so I was pretty much vegan, didn't feel good, went to a cardiologist. She said, I have a partial blockage, so I'm not starting keto 1 meal a day. Okay, interesting. So let me do this. We're really past our time, but let me share my screen. Liver cancer no more. I want to go through this, and next week, part 2, we're going to talk about a physician you met, Dr. Theodore Watkins, who worked with you, and we're going to get into more of the nuts and bolts of your healing process. And we'll meet Dr. Watkins next week as a physician I had the chance to meet by phone this weekend, and I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. But here is, and I'm going to help us out with the imaging here. This is a CAT scan, and this is the back, and this is the stomach, and the way to read this is that the feet are coming out at you, and the head is back on the other side of the screen, and the left side is over here, and the right side is over here. And so the liver is mostly over here, but it's kind of swollen. It kind of moves into some of these other organs you don't see, but you see this little mass right here. And there's an irregular shape there. So this was done in August 19th of 2013. So this is a CAT scan. So this was one of the imaging studies that were used to make the diagnosis. And so after you've gone through your process of juicing and healing, then we had this image. And base is just a little scarred area here. Mm-hmm. You don't see that mass anymore in the little homogeneous look of the liver. So we see a nice before and after image. Now, alpha-fetoprotein, this is a busy slide. I'm not going to go through this, but I'm going to freeze it there for a minute. So anybody want to take a screenshot can take it and get that information. We'll talk about it maybe next week. But I do want to share some of the labs with you. This is a little bit busy. But the alpha-fetoprotein level, and right around the time of diagnosis, 205, it actually went up. You mentioned you had gotten sicker some areas, times, so it went up and then eventually came down, way down to the normal range. Normal range was 0 to 8.3. So it was high here, but by the time you got to 2018, it was really normal. But you were feeling better, even though it had not gotten to normal, but it had come down considerably. Now, as you mentioned, bilirubin, alk-phos, AST, ALT, these are the normal liver enzymes. And notice how most of them are not too far. Here's some of the high here, but then they're coming on down, and some are high here right around the time of diagnosis. I suspect before this time, they were all within normal range, but it was at the peak. You probably had some inflammatory type process going on here that these were abnormal, and same thing here. But I suspect we had labs before this, they were probably normal, and they came down to normal as well. Now, if we look at the alkaline phosphatase, which is part of the liver panel, and it's an enzyme. It can be elevated with mets to the bone, and a lot of it's related to high cell turnover. So it's not necessarily specific to any cancer or anything in the liver, but related to high cell turnover of some type. But you see here, it really went up very high. This is early around the time of the diagnosis, but then through your healing process, it came down. And this red bar represents the upper limit of normal level. And then here is the alpha fetoprotein level, kind of went up, and then you had that big spike, and it came down tremendous. So right about the time you were healing, even though it was probably a little bit barely abnormal, it was just off the scale here. And so you essentially have two different scales. It's almost a flat line there. So we have a situation where you clearly, the biochemistry and the imaging all go along with your body healing itself, and you were feeling much better as well. And so this is a very, very remarkable story and a very impressive story. So again, thank you for sharing with us. And what I want to do is I want to invite our guests to join us next week for part 2, because what I want to do is delve into the nuts and bolts of what you did. We touched on it a lot today, but we're going to have Dr. Theodore Watkins with us. We're going to ask him to introduce himself and share his approach. And then we'll have the two of you sort of take over the stage and talk about what you did in this process of your healing, because I think our audience will really like that and really get a lot of that. So any final words, Mr. Smith, today that leads into next week?
It's doable. It's doable. I'm still healing from certain things, and there's some principles to healing, period, that we must all entail. We as a people, we've been through slavery, not just this time in America, but we've been in slavery up to 7 times in different parts of history, and that's a whole nother subject. So we're kind of misguided. So we have to get back to doing things God's way, de-stressing, prayer and meditation, eating good food, hanging around good people that are emulating what we need to be as. There's a whole series of things that we can get there, and we continue to grow. If we're not growing, we're dying. And so, trust me, I've been dead quite a few times.
You're like Lazarus, you come back.
Praise God.
Come back. Well, I'll tell you one thing. That's with that, we'll end it on that note. We have a part 2 next week. You guys, I'll see you backstage as I close out. Again, thank you very much for joining us this evening. This is a remarkable story. You know, I take my hat off to Mr. Smith, and I really enjoy hearing his story in particular, and stories like this in general. What I want to do is I want to emphasize to you the bravery of him, the courage it took to in the midst of that diagnosis, because many times, and I've seen patients with diagnoses like cancer and other issues, they're not as calm and methodical. They don't necessarily reach out to God in the way that we all should, or a higher power, whatever higher power that we reach out to. And he did those things. And these are the steps that we take. You know, God put us through these things. When God put us through tribulation, he wants us to tribulate. not, Xanax 8 or whatever the case may be. But the key is that we should, take a deep breath, step back and assess what our condition is. And he was analytical. I mean, he's a data-driven guy. He was analytical. He talked to different doctors. He looked at different approaches. He looked back and, analyzed what happened to his relatives. And then he looked at alternative approaches. So he was quite analytical in the approach, and he wasn't emotional. So he took it step by step. And I think his prayer gave him peace. I mean, there's biblical scripture that supports that theory. So I want to share with you that, whoever you are, whatever you're going through, it's not the end. I've treated many patients with severe illnesses, whether it's end-stage heart disease and liver disease and all of these things. And one thing I would like to convey to you is that it's not hopeless. Take a deep breath, reach out to God, ask him to give you the strength and ask him to give you the calmness and the peace to make the right decisions. If you take that first step, that's the first step to healing right there. Because when you give peace from God, from an outside source, from a power above you, that gives you the ability to make other rational decisions, and you do it without just running around and trying to just grab at the next best thing or whatever you think the next best thing is. So I think it's really important to understand that aspect of this. And so next week, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the healing process. We're going to meet Dr. Watkins, one of the doctors that worked with him during this healing process. And we're going to help you get some detailed information that may help you with whatever health issues you're dealing with. Until next time, keep it fresh, natural, and live.